This is the Claw from MSI, a PC handheld that is meant to rival the Steam Deck and ROG Ally, and while its form factor might be familiar, the insides are extremely unique, as it's the first handheld from a large first-party manufacturer to feature an Intel chip instead of AMD. But is that alone worth it to buy this new handheld? Well, it's too early to say, as I've only had this thing for about 2 days now. But let's go over my first impressions of the device and what I like and dislike about it. And trust me, there's a lot to say here. So the MSI Claw was released recently in the US, and the pricing is a little all over the place. The cheapest version of the Claw is the config with an Intel Core Ultra 5 135H, and with 512 gigs of storage. That config will cost you $699 US. And the next version up is $50 more expensive, but comes with a Core Ultra 7 155H, so seemingly a slightly more powerful CPU, but that same 512 gigs of storage. And then for another $50, you can double the amount of storage up to 1 terabyte, but you keep the exact same Core Ultra 7 CPU. Now, as of this recording, there aren't enough tests out yet to understand the biggest differences between these two chips, so I can't really talk about that yet, but the configuration I got is that middle Core Ultra 7 155H, just so I could see how much performance this thing could really push out. Opening the box was uneventful. It's just got a couple of quick start guides that provide information like plug in your device and press power button, as well as the MSI Claw itself, and this unbelievably massive power cable. I'm still in disbelief that a product that is meant to be portable has a charger that is this big. This must be the biggest cable yet compared to the Steam Deck, ROG Ally, or even the Lenovo Legion Go. I'm not sure why they decided to use one this big, it must be a power thing, but if I can get away with just using my own charger, I will. The Claw has a very familiar form factor in that it looks and feels very similar to the ROG Ally. The plastic on the shell does feel pretty good and doesn't feel cheap like some other handhelds. It's almost like MSI has experience making portable electronics. Who knew? On top we have a power button, micro SD slot for expandable storage, a dedicated Thunderbolt 4 USB-C port that can be used for PD charging, a 3.5mm headphone port, and volume up and down. On the front we have 2 Hall effect joysticks in an Xbox style layout, a nice little D-pad that is extruding from the device and feels good to click, ABXY face buttons, and then 4 buttons around the edge of the screen that I'll go more into later. On the back we have M1 and M2 buttons that your middle finger naturally rests on, so you can bind them to whatever you want. They aren't in the best place for something that you'd be pressing all the time, but to bind it to something you might use from time to time wouldn't be too bad. The entire device is pretty light and doesn't feel too bulky like the Legion Go. It feels very similar to the ROG Ally in my hands, but it's less blocky and more ergonomic with these curved handles. They fit my hands better than the ROG Ally ever did. After plugging in the charger and turning it on, I went through a lengthy Windows 11 setup and declined all the normal Windows bullcrap like Microsoft Office and OneDrive, and eventually was brought to the Windows homepage. Like the good boy I am, I immediately did all of my Windows updates, and then got into the MSI software and found the update page on there as well. I know these handhelds always suck out the gate because they need time to update and patch all the issues that are going to arise, so do know that this impressions video was filmed on March 14th, 2024, and had everything updated to the newest patch I could. It's a small thing, but why isn't there an update all button on this page? I had to go to each one of these and hit update, wait for it to finish, and then do the next one. How hard would it have been to put an update all button? The MSI software comes preloaded and allows access to all of your game libraries, settings, and really anything else you need to do that isn't done through Windows. None of the game libraries like Steam or Epic Games are pre-installed at all, so you'll need to go download all of those now. Until these libraries are installed, these links will just redirect you to the website where you can download them for yourself. This isn't that big of a deal, but I think they should have had at least Steam pre-installed. This button on the bottom right of the screen opens the quick settings menu, and this is where you'll access settings you need on the fly like brightness and power settings, as well as shortcuts like end task, show desktop, and display the virtual keyboard. So it's nice to have these settings here. I found myself hitting the quick settings button quite often, but there were many times that hitting it just did nothing, or it would be a delayed appearance. I'd say like 50% of the time it was either delayed or really did nothing, which was pretty annoying, but I'm sure it can be fixed through future updates. The bottom left button opens up that MSI Center software whenever you need it, and the other 2 buttons are essentially start and select buttons. The 7-inch screen is bright and beautiful, and I had no issues with it during this initial impressions. It reaches up to 120Hz refresh rate and has a maximum resolution of 1920 by 1080, but I doubt you'll be playing any AAA games anywhere near those specs. More on that later, but I have no qualms with the screen so far. It's what I expected and it looks pretty good. The speakers sound legitimately pretty impressive. They have a nice range of highs and lows and aren't as tinny sounding as some of the other handhelds. I wouldn't say they're a 10 out of 10, but I was pleasantly surprised. Apparently this device is able to handle Wi-Fi 7, which is pretty cool and an upgrade from the competitors. But all I have in my house is Wi-Fi 6, and testing the speeds was pretty successful, and I'd say in line with what I expected. Probably one of the best Wi-Fi chips I've seen in a PC handheld. The SSD provided is an NVMe Gen 4, and testing the speeds via Crystal Disk Mark, we got some very fast storage that is in line with Gen 4 speeds. I'm not taking the device apart until I do my full review, so I can't say for sure if this SSD is reliable or what brand they used, so be sure to get subscribed and be on the lookout for my full review soon. Alright, let's get to some gaming. I got a few games installed just to see what initial performance could look like, and I'm sure these numbers will improve with time, so don't take these numbers at 100% accurate forever. I ran all of these on the performance power settings. I tried a few indie games and had no problem running them at 1080p, and they looked gorgeous and played well. But that's to be expected. When I tried running Elden Ring, I realized that the controls were not working. Well, they kind of were working, but it felt like the buttons weren't doing what they were supposed to do. I tried going to the controller settings to maybe pick a different layout, but it didn't really do anything. I later realized that this was a bug where if you Alt-Tab or change any resolution settings, it switches your controls from gamepad to desktop mode, even though the quick settings menu says I'm still in gamepad mode. This was really annoying, and the only way I could fix it was to restart the machine, but I later figured out as long as I Alt-Tab a few times, it would switch back to gamepad mode and work normally. A pretty dumb bug that I hope they fix soon. Elden Ring doesn't run particularly well on Steam Deck or any other PC handheld, so I didn't hold my breath, but to get this into a playable spot, I had to dial the resolution down to 720p and all the graphical settings to low. And that allowed me to get an average FPS of around 42, which is playable, but I was expecting a little more considering how much excitement people had over this Intel chip, like they expected it to be the savior of PC handhelds. My Steam Deck under the same conditions averages out at around 35 FPS, so that's an increase of 7 FPS. Not an amazing amount of performance increase, but it's there. I honestly was expecting a lot more, and I'm sure we will get some better performance the more they work on the firmware. It's not like this is a bad playing experience, by the way. It's in line with all the other PC handhelds and works just fine. Moving on, I tried Far Cry 6 via Ubisoft Connect, and at 720p I was able to hover around 55 FPS. The game played well, and I think it looks really good on the screen too. I haven't tried this game on my Steam Deck yet, but from looking at testing that others have done, the Steam Deck averages around 44 FPS using the same settings. So 11 FPS increase is a pretty substantial amount on the MSI Claw. It might be the difference between, do I let this FPS hang out around 50 to 60, or do I lock it to 30 for a more streamlined experience? I think we will see more performance numbers in the future, but it's clear that some games are going to run better than others and won't have a perfect comparison to the other handhelds. I wanted to test Ghost Runner, but I just couldn't get it to run at all. I was getting into the menu of the game, but then when I tried to load a game, it would just black screen me and crash. I tried reinstalling the game, but that did not help. Not sure why this is happening, to be honest, but it was a little disheartening. I've played this game very easily on every other PC handheld, and this is the first time I've had any kind of issue. Now I wanted to do something kind of silly, but we have that USB-C port up top that says it supports Thunderbolt 4. So I decided to try plugging in my external GPU into it to see how much performance we can get. I plugged it in and was able to get video output on the monitor pretty simply and downloaded the drivers for the GPU I was testing with, which was an RTX 3060 Ti. The CPU on the Claw said it can boost up to 4.8 GHz, so I was expecting some really sick performance, but that's not quite what I got. It took a few tries to get the GPU to work, but the only way I could get it working is to disable the internal Claw screen and show the display only on the external monitor, which I guess makes sense since it only uses the GPU. While I did see some performance increase, it was nowhere near what I've seen using this thing on like a $100 Office laptop from 2017. I had Far Cry 6 up at that 720p resolution, and while I was able to get 95 FPS standing still in a quiet area, when walking around my FPS was hovering around the 70s, which is nearly a 25 FPS increase, so we're definitely using the GPU. But that's it. This is a desktop GPU playing a game in medium settings in 720p. We should be able to easily get 150 FPS plus if this CPU could just push the power that it says it has. I'm not really sure why I couldn't get this thing to perform better, even after messing with the power settings and trying to max out the TDP. I just couldn't get it to do better. It's very possible that I'm doing something wrong, but there isn't exactly any guidance from MSI on how to do this properly. And I've been using it successfully on 5 of the devices recently, so I think this is another issue that just needs to get fixed with patches and updates. We will have to wait until the full review to do more testing, like battery length, charging times, and a bunch of different games, and my thoughts on using it for more than a day. My initial impressions are that this thing is pretty cool so far. It's certainly better than the ROG Ally in most aspects by a little bit, but the biggest elephant in the room is the price. This config cost me $750, Meanwhile, you can buy the ROG Ally brand new for $600 these days, as well as an open box version for only $500. Is this thing worth $250 more? I don't know yet, but I'm excited to see what's next in store for the Claw and look forward to seeing all the updates MSI provides. But what do you think of this so far? Are you thinking of buying one? Let me know in the comments below. Like the video if you liked it, and get subscribed for the full MSI Claw review in the future. My name is Jason. Thanks for watching.